Hey guys, what's up? So, as you may or may not know, December 10th marks the date where all of the weapons from Call of Duty Black Ops Cold War are officially going to merge with the current Call of Duty Modern Warfare Warzone. Now, of course, there's going to be a lot more to that update than what I just mentioned, but for this video, I'm not going to talk about the update per se. What I'm going to do is specifically talk about controller settings, or at least what I think is going to give you an edge when it comes to playing against other enemy players. So whether you're a new player or you're someone who's thinking about playing Warzone for the first time, or if you're someone who's been playing for a while and you're always looking for new tips and tricks or insight from other players, which is going to improve your overall experience with Warzone, then hopefully by the end of this video, you'll learn something new and you can apply it to yourself and have a better overall experience. So that being said, let's get into the controller settings. All right, guys, so the first thing we're going to be talking about is going to be controller sensitivity. Now, this is going to be quite simple in my opinion, but I'm still going to get into detail about this. So when it comes to your controller sensitivity, what I would argue is that you want to have the highest possible sensitivity that you can actually control. So as you can see for me personally, I like to run 7.7. To me, that's pretty snappy. It's pretty fast, but it's not unbearable. It's not like I'm running 12.12 or something crazy high, which I'm sure some players do. And if you're running a sensitivity that's higher than mine and you're able to control that, then I would say you have an advantage over me because you would be able to react faster, if that makes sense. So any player that's running a lower sensitivity to whatever you're using, you're going to have an edge over them. Now, at this point, I've been using this sensitivity for Cold War and Modern Warfare for a while. I probably could increase it a little bit. I probably should try at some point because you don't want to keep it the same forever. You want to slowly increase it until you're able to control that high sensitivity, which is going to give you an obvious edge over any player that has a lower sensitivity to you. All right, so it's very simple, but very important to realize. But you have to be honest with yourself to see if you can actually manage whatever sensitivity you're using. So in a nutshell, use the highest possible sensitivity. If you can't handle it, just lower it a little bit. All right. I like to use 7.7. All right. So next we're going to talk about the aim down sight. Oh, low zoom and high zoom sensitivities. Okay, so there's a little bit I want to talk about when it comes to low zoom. So as you can see, I'm running zero point 0.8, and this is a sweet spot that I like to use. Now, what this means is if you're using a 4x scope or less, this means every time you're aiming down the sight with that scope, your sensitivity for aiming is going to be manipulated a little bit. So in my case, it's actually going to be lessened because default is 1, but I'm at zero point 0.8. So when there's an enemy player that's, let's say, close to medium range, it's not a big deal either way. But in those cases where if there's an enemy player that's far away, then having a higher low zoom sensitivity could be more difficult because it's going to be harder to actually lock onto that target and aim precisely because the farther someone is, the smaller they're going to be, and it's going to be a little bit more difficult, to maintain that target onto that enemy. So if you're running a lower sensitivity low zoom, then it's just going to be a little bit easier to track that enemy player, especially if you're shooting each other and you're flinching. Like you, I would recommend you guys use a low zoom sensitivity that's a little bit less than default. Give it a shot. I definitely notice it benefits me a lot. Now, when it comes to the high zoom sensitivity, which is any scope that's over a 4x, so basically like sniping, for example, if you feel like a 1 is not snappy enough for you, then of course you can increase it. But me personally, I think 1, which is default, is just fine when it comes to the high zoom optics. Okay, so next we're going to talk about button layout. I highly recommend if you're someone who's been playing default button layout in previous Call of Duties or for a long time, I really recommend you try at least tactical. Because at least with tactical, you'll be able to drop shot enemy players. Now, I'm not going to get into how you do that and all that. It is an obvious advantage, and unfortunately, as a lot of you probably already know, in Cold War, you have to use a specific attachment to be able to drop shot. I disagree with that, but overall, in any Call of Duty game, if you're able to drop shot, it's just an added benefit, an added little edge you'll have against other players. And, if you don't know what drop shotting is, it's when, you meet head to head with an enemy player and they immediately go prone and they shoot you. Makes it harder for you to hit them because they're lying down and you're trying to shoot them, but they're already prone. You know what I mean? So I highly recommend you use tactical. Besides that, I mean, you can use any other one you want. This one is kind of optional, but I recommend tactical. All right. Next, flip. It's optional. I play inverted. I know it's kind of weird, but you know, long story short. All right. Aim response curve type. Okay, so this can get a little complicated. I know other YouTubers have made videos specifically about just this setting, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to try and keep it as simple as I can possibly keep it. So what I'm going to do is in the description of this video, go ahead and read what I put down there when it comes to the aim response curve types. I'll try and keep it very simple so you guys can kind of comprehend what each of these curve types means because I know people can read what it says here about the definitions. Like there's a definition for the curve types in the settings menu, but people still are like, I don't know what this means. So I'm gonna write it down in the description of this video, and in case you don't care, I mean, you can't go wrong with any of them. Standard is just fine. A lot of the pro players, I remember they use a lot of pro players use linear. I personally like dynamic because it's a little bit more snappier. Again, it's just complicated to talk about. I can't even comprehend how to explain all of them, verbally. So check out the description, try them out, see which one works best for you, and whichever one you end up liking the most, then once you find that, again, that's going to give you a slight edge against other players, right? Okay. Next, controller vibration. I recommend you turn this off. I mean, there's no point in having the vibration. It's just kind of like a subtle distraction in the back of your head. Like you may not notice when you're like in a gunfight or something, but if you play for any amount of time with this off, and then you go back to, like, let's say you turn controller vibration back on, then it feels weird. So if you guys have been playing with vibration on for a long time or your whole life, just trust me, disable it and you're going to realize how much better off you are with this disabled. Trigger effect, this is going to be a PS5 thing. Like I'm playing on PS5 right now, so the haptic feedback for these triggers is really, really cool. But as soon as I used it in multiplayer or zombies, I was like, this is really cool, but there's no way I would actually use this against other players. So I would highly recommend, although it's very cool, to just disable it. I don't want to feel resistance when I'm, trying to shoot someone in Warzone or whatever, like it's gonna be like it's just gonna negatively affect you, like it's just gonna slow you down and take you longer to take out an enemy player, So I would disable trigger effect. All right, let's keep going. Let's see. Aim down sight, aim assist. This is for campaign and zombies only, so it's optional. Right here, slow down and strafing aim assist. I would enable that. It's going to give you, again, another little bit of a edge. Some people, I'm sure they disable this, but I think enabling it would be better for most, right? Let's see. Airborne mantle behavior, automatic. Aim down sight behavior, hold. Steady aim behavior, hold. Armor behavior, this is going to be optional, but I'm going to prefer to use apply all for myself. Either one is just fine, but at least with apply all, I can hold the button and have all of them be applied without me having to worry about it, So that's just a personal thing. Either way, doesn't matter that much. Next is going to be attack vehicle control mode. I suggest you guys give alternate a shot because with this option here, you'll be able to move in a vehicle and you can look around you while you're still going towards a certain direction. So on the right here, where it says aim base, the description says when you move forward, uh, the camera will automatically turn to move in the direction that you're looking at. And I mean, that's fine, but I don't want that. I want to be able to go somewhere and look around me at the same time. So I think I would strongly suggest you guys give alternate a try. Okay, next, under the advanced settings, let's see, stick layout. This is going to be optional. Now, like I mentioned earlier, I am playing on a PS5, so my controller is brand new. So I'm not going to be experiencing any stick drift. So I'm going to be keeping these settings right here as default. Now, if you're someone who has a older controller, or if you already know that you experience stick drift, or from time to time you experience it, then all you have to do is just increase these input thresholds until that stick drift stops. But other than that, if you have a good condition controller, then you don't have to worry about this. You can skip this and just keep it at default. Now, controller sounds optional. Auto move forward is going to be disabled. Auto sprint, some people really advise to enable this, but I personally just have to disagree. I feel like enabling auto sprint is just going to make you less in control of your character. I know that sounds kind of weird because some players have this on and they do very well, but I think for most players, especially a lot of the newer people who might be jumping onto Warzone for the first time, you should just keep this as default, which is disabled. Sprint behavior toggle, sprint cancels reload. You definitely want to disable this. If you enable it, what this does is it's going to cancel your reload if you start to sprint, and you don't want to be reloading and then if someone starts shooting at you, you're like, oh, I gotta run. You start running, and then you cancel that reload, and now it's like, oh, like no, you want to reload and run at the same time. Like I strongly suggest you disable the sprint cancels reload. Next, parachute auto deploy. This is a big one, especially for Warzone. If they're going to keep the same mechanics for how parachutes work once Cold War merges with Modern Warfare, then still I'm going to suggest you turn this off. If you have this on, what this does is it's going to force your parachute to deploy at a certain distance above the ground, but that distance is still kind of high. If you disable this setting, then you'll be able to deploy later after that default setting if this is enabled, which means you'll be able to touch to the ground a lot faster. And common sense, if you touch the ground before an enemy player, you can get a weapon faster, you can get a vehicle faster, all of that. And this is a huge advantage. Like, this is a clear-cut advantage. I definitely suggest you disable parachute auto deploy. Now for equipment behavior, we're going to keep this at default, which is hold. And as for the last big setting, this is going to be the interact slash reload behavior. So for this, you're going to have four options, but there's really only two that you should be choosing from. So I would suggest you either choose prioritize reload or prioritize interact. This way, at least you'll be able to just press, like in my case, since I have a PS5, I could just press square. I can reload just by pressing it, or I can pick up an item just by pressing square instead of having to hold. Prioritize just means if you care more about reloading, then if you tap square, then you will reload even if you're standing on top of a weapon that's on the ground. Or if you care more about prioritizing, items on the ground, then you would just pick prioritize interact. So that way, if you're standing on top of an item and you still need to reload, if you tap square, like in my case, it would prioritize the item on the ground. So this is completely optional, but I suggest you either choose prioritize reload or interact. All right, so next, let's see, under the graphics tab, let's see, all of this is going to be optional. Ray trace, it's pretty cool that you can turn off ray tracing if you want, but again, optional. The only thing worth mentioning in this graphics tab setting is going to be motion blur. I 100% suggest you just turn this off. I don't know if you guys can see, but on the right half of the screen, it has three pictures, one with motion blur disabled, self only, and enabled. So if you have this disabled, there's going to be no blur, which of course that's the best option because that way you can actually see, right? If you can't see the enemy player, then they're just going to kill you, right? Self only is a weird option to have. I mean, it's cool that it's an option if you want, but this means that you're going to have your character blurred with everything in the background still being clear, which is kind of weird, but and of course, enabling this is just going to blur everything, which we don't want. Just to keep it simple, just disable motion blur. All right. Next, under audio settings, all this stuff, again, it's just going to be optional, guys. It's all up to you. Um, there's not much else to say about this. See, interface, again, nothing that has to do much about gameplay. This is all optional, but since we are here, I might as well mention if you guys do want to turn off like damage hit markers, the health bars from allies or enemies, all that stuff, you can just disable it here, whichever option you want. Alright guys, so that just about wraps up the entire video. I hope it was helpful. If you learned anything new, definitely let me know in the comments below. Like the video, and just in case you guys are interested, I am going to be making a Call of Duty Cold War attachments guide series for all of the weapons in this game. It may take a while, but I definitely plan on doing it. So if you're interested in that, definitely subscribe to the channel. Besides that, guys, thanks for watching. I'll see you in my next video.